Resuming debate, the honourable member Battle River Crowfoot.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And as always, it is an honour to rise in this place to talk about the important issues facing Canadians. But Madam Speaker, as being signalled last week and coming into the debate today, having understanding the gravity of the conversation that is Bill C-39, the fact that we have before us a bill that presses pause, a one-year pause on the implementation of the state being able to, through a medical assistance in dying regime, see individuals take their own life for the sole underlying cause of having a mental illness. Madam Speaker, it's moments like this where one has no option but to pause, to think about the gravity of the issues to which we discuss here. And certainly, when it comes to this delay, I support it. I think that a year is not nearly long enough, and like many others of my colleagues, I believe that a delay simply does not go far enough in terms of something that should never be on the table. Madam Speaker, when it comes to mental health, we've heard today something that has been mentioned a lot in the idea of hope. The fact that we need hope. And offering death to someone who feels hopeless, Madam Speaker, is not hope. You know, I find it very, very troubling. And the tragic irony, Madam Speaker, that over the course of the time that I've had the honor and responsibility of serving the people of Battle River Crowfoot, we've talked a lot about suicide prevention, a lot about mental health. And I think back to one of the debates that took place during my nomination campaign. And I made a simple statement, Madam Speaker, that I didn't realize would have the effect that it does today. And it was when asked a question, me and the other nomination contestants in Wainwright, actually, home to a military base. I was asked the question about mental health, generally about what was required for mental health. And it was a productive discussion, but one of the statements that I made in the response to that question was that I believe that mental health is health. And Madam Speaker, a young man came up to me, the child of a veteran, came up to me afterwards and said that he was so encouraged by the fact that somebody finally was willing to say that mental health was health. Madam Speaker, I cannot emphasize enough how vitally important that context is for the discussions that we're having around Bill C-39. And specifically, how when we have, and I mentioned the honor I have of representing a military base, and the fact that there's been veterans who called Veterans Affairs asking for help, yet were offered death. Madam Speaker, that defies what I thought was possible. But Madam Speaker, the reality is, in this country, we need to make sure that we are prioritizing hope. And when we look at the context of where we got to, while we've talked about, this bill is happening a whole lot faster than a 3-digit suicide hotline that this Parliament unanimously called for more than a year ago. Madam Speaker, it's unfortunate that where political will exists, things can move quickly. Yet unfortunately, when it comes to that idea of help, that idea of care, health care for those struggling with suicidal thoughts, ensuring that those who have mental health challenges are given the care that they need, yet we have before us a bill that simply delays for 1 year the offer of death. I think that, again, as I've reflected much on this issue. We were told back in this debate, and although being elected in 2019, much of the debate that took place over medical assistance in dying, that the concerns that were raised certainly by many members, both those who sit in the Conservative caucus today and others, and including not limited to the former Attorney General, and I believe representatives from all parties represented in this place, that the concerns that we laid forward like this were simply considered a slippery slope, a logical fallacy. Yet here we are. In fact, Madam Speaker, in the context of this discussion, I received a story. A story was sent to me. And I'd like to read that story in this place. Recently, my friend's mother, Carmen, was the victim of a physician attempting to coerce her into MAID. She was quite insistent on it, to the point of causing severe distress. His main point of sale was that it would save the hospital a lot of money, and it was her duty to do the right thing for the hospital and her family to just do it. I couldn't think of a circumstance where somebody would be more vulnerable, dealing with the challenges associated with mental health and some of the challenges associated with underlying health conditions, as was the case with this individual. But instead of being given that opportunity for life, it was presented as a duty to save the state a few dollars, to save her family from having to journey beside her through an illness. Madam Speaker, the folks from Battle River Crowfoot will know very well my faith background. And I think often of some of the Bible verses that I was taught as a child and remember often here today. And I'd like to read specifically one here today that is certainly one that has offered me hope during challenging times. And Madam Speaker, that's Jeremiah 29, verse 11. And I think that many in this House will have heard this verse before, and it goes, "For I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for good and not for evil, to give you a future and hope." So, Madam Speaker, as we enter into the discussion around the idea of whether or not somebody that is facing a challenging circumstance in their life, that is facing the challenges of mental health distress, to the point where they would be led to, and heaven forbid, coerced into making an irreversible decision, such as that which is medical-assisted death. Madam Speaker, let us remember that, like others in this place have mentioned, that as members of Parliament, as leaders in this country, and certainly I would hope as members of the government from across the way, that we would always endeavor to be catalysts for hope. That we would ensure that the things we do, whether it be on the partisan discussions of which members in this House will know well, I love to participate in, or whether it comes to the assistance of ensuring that those who walk through, in my case in Battle River Crowfoot, every person who walks through my office door, to make sure that we do everything we can to extend that hope that is so desperately needed. Madam Speaker, let's ensure that as we have this discussion, as we have this now one-year pause of the implementation of mental health being the sole underlying factor for medically assisted death, let us take pause and think very, very carefully, not only as parliamentarians, but as a country, as a society, as those who are called to look out for the most vulnerable among us, whether that be Indigenous, immigrant populations, women, the list goes on and on, to ensure that we respond not with the extension of a mechanism that would allow somebody to take their own life, but let's, for those who are facing the most severe mental health challenges, let's ensure that our automatic response, Madam Speaker, would be to offer that olive branch of hope. Thank you.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, since the Supreme Court decision in 2015 going into 2016, the government has been working very closely with members of all sides of the House, and even today, in passing legislation, it takes more than just government members in order to pass legislation. I suspect that virtually all members will be supporting and voting in favor of this legislation because they see the value in terms of what it is that the government is proposing, and that is to put it off, to ultimately delay things for a year so that we can feel more comfortable in making sure that we're getting things right. And my question to the member is to acknowledge that the Government of Canada has appointed a task group of experts to develop MAID practice standards in collaboration with provincial and territorial governments, regulatory bodies, and clinicians across Canada. I'm wondering if he feels that that organization, or many of those organizations and stakeholders should have any say in terms of the future of MAID legislation.
The Honourable for Battle River Crowfoot.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And, you know, in the very bureaucratic explanation that the Parliamentary Secretary just read, I think that it bears mentioning the tragic irony that exists here. We are debating an extension of medical assistance in dying being offered to those with mental illness as the sole underlying condition. Yet, this House unanimously, only a number of years ago, passed a motion to bring about a 988 suicide prevention hotline, of which it seems certainly to me, Madam Speaker, that is progressing at a snail's pace. Canadians don't need more bureaucratic language, more task forces, more excuses from a government that is refusing to acknowledge the fact that instead of the expansion of medically assisted death by the state to those with mental illness, we should be talking about ensuring that all Canadians have the hope to live for the future.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Port Moody Coquitlam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I've heard a lot of talking tonight about the need for support. So I would just ask the member in the year, potentially, that there is time for additional consultation, and I hope the government will listen to the outcomes of those consultation. What kind of supports, financial supports, could the members suggest? I mean, on the NDP side, we'd like to see pharmacare. We think that people being able to be healthy and to be able to afford their medication is important. Housing, affordable housing is another opportunity to increase the supports for folks. I wonder if the member could just expand on some of the opportunities in the next year. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Battle River Crowfoot.
You know, I find it interesting, Madam Speaker, the number of calls that I've taken over the past, specifically the last 8 months or so, it seems. There's been a real pickup in the number of people, seniors, single parents, women who are endeavoring to get out of difficult situations, who, when going to the grocery store, are not able to afford the bare minimum that it takes to feed themselves and often their family. So, Madam Speaker, we need to make sure that we have a compassionate approach to welfare in this country to ensure that those who are most vulnerable get it. But we also need to make sure that every opportunity for Canadians to succeed is granted to them. Because I see so often in this place how that is being denied to Canadians. And I see that in my own constituency. And as that member specifically has supported the shutdown and the loss of tens of thousands of jobs in my constituency, Madam Speaker, let's take pause. And instead of promoting plans that would worsen the economic circumstances for many Canadians, like those promoted through the Just Transition that this Prime Minister is pushing for, let's make sure that we provide hope and opportunity for absolutely every Canadian, and make sure that we're there to support those who need help when they need it most. Thank you, Madam Speaker.